Hello, everybody. I want to thank you for coming back to Agave Festival Marfa this year, 2022. At this moment, we are celebrating the appearance of this book called Brown Neon, Essays by Raquel Gutierrez. Woo, woo. It's a book that basically just came out. Because it just came out, I've only read the first section. But Raquel's a person who I've known in a very, I've known for years. I don't know. We had a poetry gathering here some years ago, and listening to Raquel read was the thing I remember the most. And we have seen each other sporadically through the years since that time. And Raquel is a person who I think of as extraordinarily precious to me. One of the most capacious and complex and compassionate thinkers that I know, and I've been following their work as a poet and as an essayist as it appears online and on their website and so forth. And I think there's so much of this person in their writing. And one of the incredible things that they do is also bring forward the words of other people who are in their community and ancestrally or whatever, genealogically in their community through their work. And it's all still Raquel in a very beautiful way. An incredible coherence that's nonetheless complex and very moving. There's a line in the second or third page that has already made me cry twice. I identified it with it so deeply. And other aspects of it would be almost weirdly transgressive to suggest that I do identify with it so deeply, but I do. And I'm going to say that Raquel is a person whose work I will always follow. There are artists who just, I'm a lifer for this artist. And that's how I feel about Raquel Gutierrez. And it's an honor. This is your first book, even though they've been a part of literary culture for ages, I think now, in a way it feels. But this is their first book, and so to me it feels like a very special moment. So I hope everyone will give a warm welcome to Raquel Gutierrez.
Tim Johnson, everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you to Tim, of course, for organizing the Agave Festival, for, all right, breaker, 1, 2, 1, 2, thank you. For gathering us here and for being a wonderful, Tim and Caitlin being so generous and such a great hub, right? Just like for us to welcome us here in Tucson, myself, my partner, and our dog Lalo. And it's I also love that Tim wore a Bigoto Laugh shirt, so thank you for that. Amazing. And so, it's my first book, and there's some mention of Marfa in the mix here. This is a I'm going to read several sections in the book here, just to kind of give you a sense of what's going on. I'm basically just traveling through the deserts of the borderland. And so with that said, I'll start with the first section from this essay called On Making Butch Family and Intertextual Dialogue. It's just to kind of help locate myself in the space of Brown Neon. 2015. The battery light shines red on my dashboard, a warning jolting me out of an obsessive sing-along. I am alone in my car again, repeating the hook of lovin', touchin', squeezin', as a way to offset the numbness that comes with the unremarkable parts of a road trip in progress. On the highway, I'm just another heavy heart lifted by song, imagining loved ones shrinking in the distance with each stolen glance at the rearview mirror. My reptilian brain is low on dopamine again. It wants its queer family. It wants to hit Steve Perry high notes next time it does karaoke. It wants to be on to the next occasion. The possibility of my car breaking down and preventing me from orchestrating the next occasion sends a chill. My car has never broken down before, and certainly not in the big, bad, scary desert. I travel west on the 10, heading back to Los Angeles trudging through 103 degrees of Arizona's unsparing desert heat. As soon as I touch down in Quartzsite, one of the last towns near the state line, I go for my car owner's manual. Just how screwed could I possibly be with 300 miles still to go? The electrical system is on the verge of shutting down. I decide that if I'm going to break down, I want to do it in a blue state. I have more than 20 miles to go before I hit Blythe, California. I get back in my car, take a deep breath, roll down the windows, and head west to Blythe. Blythe is a place I have newly begun to appreciate as the last bastion of chill, brown Califas. I don't want to be an irredeemably spoiled Californian brat and call bad vibes, but it was 2016 and the wound of SB 1070 was still fresh. The Show Me Your Papers law was first a bill that included provisions that gave law enforcement the power to determine anyone's immigration status during any lawful stop. SB 1070 also pushed for the requirement for all alien non-citizens to carry registration documents. Undocumented people couldn't seek employment. Arguably the worst were the warrantless arrests. Folks could be arrested for just being suspected of being undocumented. If we didn't see the seeds of fascism being planted in this 2010 series of planned violences, then we weren't looking hard enough. How, in 2010, could we not know that people we knew or knew of were already being disappeared? This has been the way political structures permeate the sweeping views of Arizona's natural environment. State power is always present in these stunning terrains, but it's not confined solely to Arizona, just as every state in the Union claims a flower as its own. This occurs to me as I pass the Welcome to California sign. I haven't seen the golden poppies that adorn the sign, but know they bloom year-round. It's the poet's job to make you fall in love with the idea of state flowers. Its promise of a shared identity built around a regional flower that relies more on bee pollination than water. Who could be unmoved by such a seduction? I grew up seeing those beguiling orange poppies while making the drive between California's deserts. As a kid, I was taken to see members of my mother's family eking out lives as casino mechanics and shop owners in Las Vegas and Boulder City, Nevada. Or we would take family vacations in Lake Havasu or Bullhead City in Arizona. There were always golden fields ablaze with these funny named flowers. It was the homonym for the name my sister and I used to address our father, Papi, our father. He was our first intrepid navigator through these southwestern desert roads and hardy vehicles, like our plushed out Econoline van, carpeted and upholstered in cobalt blue and replete with antenna television. I see the familiar date palms in the distance. This is how I self-soothe while anticipating the imminent moment of vehicular collapse. I pray that we, my car and I are one, will make it there in one piece. Just as I cross the Arizona-California state line checkpoint, I rev the engine and shift to hit 75 miles per hour before the car begins to shut down on me. Blythe. Next 4 exits. I just need the first one. The lights on the odometer begin to flash. The digital clock flicks all zeros and the stereo pops through my speakers. It feels a little Back to the Future, and my improvised DeLorean is tearing through the desert space-time continuum. The first exit finally appears, and I coast across lanes and make my first California stop since high school in order to peter out in front of a tractor tow lot. I'm good. It's not a miracle by any means, but I made land art with that descent. I call for roadside assistance, check that my phone is charged, and I still have 2 big bottles of water to get me through the next couple of hours. A sigh of relief that I've been careful with my recent expenditures, as I have just enough credit limit to pay for whatever damages my car is about to cost me. I thank Tucson for being so cheap. And I'm glad my lover and son are not in my car. Parting was hard. I get out of the car, light a cigarette, and take in my surroundings. I had places to be, but now time splits open for me. I'm stuck in my career, in my relationship, and now en route back to the couch I surfed in Los Angeles County when all I wanted was to be in Tucson. But I don't have a community where there with couches to choose from, trucks and tumbleweed and the hum of the interstate a few yards away, the sturdy stuff that can occupy the same space as the desert without totally melting. I'm melting. I used to be sturdy, but now I melt. And between huffs of nicotine smoke and rivulets of sweat forming on the small of my back, I feel myself seesawing between sturdy and molten in the desert heat. The tow truck and technician finally coming after the last call with the third auto shop. I know there's no way I'm going to Los Angeles anytime soon. The desert isn't ready to let go. This is just the first battle in the video game called Someone in Tucson Hearts Me, named after the threadbare yellow vintage t-shirt I had bought even though it was an extra small. The desert and I have only just begun. And so that was from the first essay. Thank you. Appreciate that. And so this next section is from my third essay in the collection. It's called Stuck in the Adobe. I'm just gonna read sections from it. Here we go. 2017. Someone I knew posted a real estate listing of a house I was intimately familiar with, if only briefly. It was crass to see the amount the house was going for on Facebook. Is this what we do now? Peruse other people's selling power? Consider buying a rehab 1927 adobe home in one of the more expensive neighborhoods in Tucson's historic downtown barrios? I started fantasizing about making the exorbitant purchase myself, melancholic in the Freudian sense, as a way to continue living with these ghosts. These ghosts needed more space. What could be better than an early 20th century adobe? I read the description in its realtor parlance and followed up with my own narration of each room. The bedroom with the hot pink accent wall, its saturation come to life. My first visit there. I kept reading and I kept yearning. And then I reached the truth wall. The truth wall lives as a part of the room that expresses how the house is built. You see the unique materials that went into the skeleton, or how we know if the house has good bones. The truth wall reveals what we are surrounded by, showing its history in the sedimentary layers of adobe, bricks that live in its triangular crevice deep in recess, high up where the wall touches the ceiling. An opening in a wall surface, the organic components within a wall, a century and its violences trapped behind spackle and stucco. A truth wall might help increase the property's value. In the era where our desires for sustainable, climate-conscious living come inside a gold level package of mercenary marriages, we marry up even when we want to slum. A truth wall or truth window often serves as a decor option demonstrative of our own interiors. The truth wall silently nodded to the breakup that put it on the market. Have you ever made adobe? Or wondered about the adoberos who made the large earth source bricks that sit like ancient sacks of sugar on top of each other? Making adobe bricks is a process that requires repetitive motion of fingers, hands, wrists, arms, elbows, and shoulders as you're bent at both waist and knee. People have been making adobe since the 10th century. An ancient how-to manual by the early Sonoran desert dwellers, the Hohokam, who the Tohono O'odham and Pima tribes descend from, and early constructors of adobe shelters might instruct you to dig a shallow trench in the ground using a well-pointed digging stick and to pile all excavated material inside of the trench. Then you fill that trench with a 3-to-1 mix of mud and broken stone or river pebbles, tamping thoroughly to fill all of the nooks and crannies. Dampen the mix only as necessary, using only enough water to soften the mud to a stiff, moldable consistency. A penalty is incurred for anyone using more than the minimum amount of water required. After the foundation has been allowed to set from one full moon to the next, place forms 3 feet high and 6-foot lengths around the perimeter of your chosen structure, inside and out, held almost 2 feet apart. Weave twigs into a scaffold of mesquite poles in front of the slowly forming shelter. Plaster with mud and allow it all to dry thoroughly for another full moon. Fill forms with mud that has been moistened only sufficiently to form a pliable mass, as used with the foundation, puddling through thoroughly but using water sparingly. Tamp with bare hands until form has been solidly filled. And for an example of ancient adobe handiwork, I recommend the Casa Grande National Ruins in southern Arizona, constructed by the prehistoric Salado tribe. Everything that made this mud, the water, the soil, the straw, occasional blood, must be strong enough to hold a house together. You need a lot to make a stable foundation, to build walls capable of holding difficult truths. The truth is often too much to traffic in, so it makes sense to put it behind a wall. You make a crack, clean the edges, and place a piece of clear glass in front so you know that it's there. You turn the truth into an object and say it's in the room with you, even when you come up with daily modes of obfuscation. Versatile is a truth able to keep you cool in the summer heat and warm every winter. 2017. I had spent the hottest part of the Arizona summer in Patagonia near Nogales. The border scorches, even above a set of mountain ranges. That means the air is 10 to 12 degrees cooler. It means a high of 96 degrees instead of the 108 back in Tucson. It means I can return some oxygen back to my coastal California-raised brain and body. I was not unaccustomed to hibernating in the middle of June. I was in a unique place, one of the most diverse in all of the United States, for Patagonia is distinguished by 6 ecosystems encountering one another. The Sonoran Desert, meeting the bottoms of the Rocky Mountains, and the Sierra Madre, butting up against the Chihuahuan Desert, leaning into the neotropics, flirting with the high desert's grassy wonderlands. I had booked it out of Tucson to beat the heat and avoid heartbreak's niggling little ghosts. Restoring habitats using sustainable ecological methods was a good place to start. Methods that required younger, stronger bodies to put their hands into the soil. The environmental study that hooked me into gifting my labor. That meant having to muster whatever elbow grease still existed inside of me, parsing it out from the usual reserves of lactic acid that typically resided in the vessels between muscle and bone. Getting up early meant shooting cold brew down my throat and chomping on organic, sugar-free beef jerky to ensure some protein could prop up my body with nutrients that would undoubtedly sweat themselves out. I trimmed mesquite trees growing on a steep incline, dug up irrigation systems overlooking red eroded buttes, and weeded amaranth out of squash crops while bent at the knee. Man, this is the food of my ancestors, I thought bitterly, pulling at the greens. By the end of day 1, my body ached, my spirit burned. I had to do my part to forget my heartache by breaking my body open. This was essentially an internship at 40, and the skeptical Jiminy Cricket lumpen proletariat in me restlessly ruminated about the unequal division of labor between the owners and the contracted labor there to tend to their land. Speaking of Tierra y Libertad, I am just one generation out from a broken Mexican economy that we left to come north seeking better opportunities. Well, not we, but he, my dad. He settled in Los Angeles in the early 70s after following various commodities: potatoes in Wisconsin, plastics in Texas, strawberries in California. He, embittered by the time I came along. I grew up weary of his moods as well as any exploitation of my labor, protecting myself against both, a daily task. But I wanted this. So the apprentice I became, it was an art I wanted to learn. I wasn't selling my labor, I was learning a skill. I wanted to do my part in creating a relational map to make, see, and share the worlds we could actually belong to if we could sustain the intimacy, talk, and then listen, dig up the remnants of the earth we shared to then pat it back down tighter, walk the wounded back to themselves and encounter a little bit of healing for myself along the way. That was the hardest part, to see and accept what might be readily offered to me without my anger or suspicion obstructing something so needful. I wanted to be and stay in the room with the pain of others and trigger the wherewithal to mark my own way back through the underworld of myself. But something changed on that third day of Borderlands restoration. My curiosity peaked when we were asked to make adobe bricks. I arrived at the deep dirt farm to a crowd of volunteers around a woman named Kate Tyrion, the proprietor, who was giving everyone instructions on how to clean an outdoor compost toilet. Tyrion was a spry and strong 70-something who, after a cancer scare in her 60s, pivoted into the healing properties of permaculture. It made me recall my own cancer scare back when I was living in the Bay Area. For 2 weeks, I didn't know if the enlarged lymph nodes under my arms had bad cysts or the plain, not bad kind. For 2 weeks, I wondered how I let my life lose its color, its volume, all while possibly incubating cancer near my breasts. Tyrion chirped me out of my reverie and into her strong Welsh accent. How fortuitous it was that we had arrived to learn such an important cornerstone of sustainability culture as she vigorously and audibly churned the bowl with her composting rake. The gut-rocking stench coming out of that outhouse made me question such fortuity. I was happy to move away from the outhouse, especially because painful fibroids were in the midst of turning my uterus inside out, biomatter surely connected to my irregular cystic lymph nodes. I would have to come inside this compost toilet to deal with golf ball-sized blood clots shooting out of me every couple of hours, though I did manage to comfort myself with 4 ibuprofens and the thought of blood being put back into the earth. It was a very Anzalduan quality, helping the borders wound heal with the runoff of my body's internal properties. It was a way I could refuse to let my body's messy condition take its emotional toll. And there were other messes to be made. We moved toward the mud pit where we would be sourcing materials to make 300 adobe bricks that morning. None of us would be going home with clean clothes. I knew that from the previous 2 work days with the restoration crew, I braced myself to soon be covered in mud, straw, and whatever species called those things home. All right, and so now I leave Patagonia. After Patagonia, I was off to Marfa, Texas. I had been invited to read at the community's inaugural poetry festival and was glad to be venturing into the West Texas landscape by myself, by car. That August marked a year alone in Tucson, and suddenly the desert felt like it could belong to me, no strings attached. Like I too could project the semiotics of self-discovery and reinvention as some kind of lulling counterpoint to the settler colonial fantasy that lived in the marrow of such fictions. I staked my dream onto the desert. Finally passing Van Horn, I detected the Milky Way above, inching itself closer to the roof of my car, its purple galaxy swirling me into dream. Can't get used to losing you. I reached for the soul beer I had been saving in my cooler and pulled the tab open. I took a long sip and let the hoppy goodness swish around inside my mouth. There was no one on the road except me. I knew of Marfa's lore, a weird high art vacation destination that pulled coastal elites into its western promise of freedom and untapped possibility. I also knew that the railroad tracks divided the brown community from the white. It would be interesting to be there while my friend, the artist Rafa Esparza, was in the middle of a summer residency. He had received a prestigious commission from Ballroom Marfa, the people responsible for commissioning that famous fake Prada store on Highway 90 just outside of Valentine, Texas. Welcome to Marfa. I had no signal whatsoever on my phone and hoped I could find Rafa's summer house. I stopped in a Dairy Queen parking lot and used the restaurant's Wi-Fi to pull up the map pin that Rafa had dropped in his last text to me. I was glad I could recall reading a map without the GPS lady intoning orders to me. Thankful for all those years reading Thomas guides in the back seat of my father's 1982 Mercury Zephyr. I managed to find the spacious bungalow in tasteful wood grain and metal-colored earth tones with a mud-splattered white pickup truck parked out front. Dang, Rafis! Rafa came out of the house wearing a cream-colored shawl and ushered me inside. It was good to see him happy and thriving in this strange place, offering him unabashed support for his art. New York level support. He was hitting the big time. We stayed up until 2 in the morning recounting recent heartbreaks and hair-raising encounters with law enforcement in the borderlands while drinking fine mezcal from a bottle that looked straight out of the Tudors. By the time I woke up the next morning, Rafa had left for his studio, an open field next to the hipster hotel where he had built a muddy bank next to a pile of straw. He had been making hundreds of adobe bricks all summer. His show opened at the end of the month, so the clock was ticking. I had only gone 3 days without bleeding, and of course, it's starting again that morning. That marked 6 months straight of bleeding. The doctor I saw back in Tucson put my gold star lesbian womb on birth control, and the adjustment was proving difficult. I made sure I had my provisions and left the house to find my way to the mud pit. It would be a collision of messes, but I was ready. Seeing Marfa by day activated all the complicated nostalgia meridians in my body. There were street signs that rung of old-timey Americana and the water tower that boasted Marfa on its belly. But it was still West Texas. Its history of denigrating treatment of Mexicans spilled into the quotidian, and that reality never escaped me. Still, I felt a star-crossed romance for this doubly crossed place, as my friend, the Los Angeles writer Ruben Martinez, denotes aptly that Marfa is a place with railroad tracks upon which trains clack through a couple of times a day, meaning you could hear bona fide train whistles enchanting for any city boy or girl. The tracks, of course, also meant that there were another side of them where the Mexicans lived. That's what they called themselves and what everyone else called them, too, in spite of the fact that many of them were second or third or fourth generation on this side of the border, speaking Spanglish, English with a Mexican accent, and Spanish with a gringo accent. On that other side of the track sat the adobe ruin of the town's old segregated school. I soon met up with Rafa's team. Ruben, also known as Fresca, the queer baby femme Chicanx multimedia artist from El Paso, who was on the mud duty, mixing water into a fresh swath of soil and straw, and Sandro Canovas from Mexico City, the hetero intellectual whose life's work examined the Mexican history of adobe architecture, was carting mud back and forth with the wheelbarrow. Fresca urged me to wear a weightlifting belt for protection, so I donned one and helped shovel mud into the wheelbarrow, trying to keep up with my stronger collaborators. But they took pity on me after seeing me nearly drop the wheelbarrow full of mud one too many times and handed me a pair of knee pads. They said I would be better off washing the brick molds and making bricks with Rafa. I happily obliged, though I knew one task wouldn't be any easier than the other. In Los Angeles, Rafa had made his name as the artist who invited anyone and everyone to come make adobe bricks with him. The bricks became his frames, often laid out as the floor of any given gallery or museum. The adobe transformed these traditional sites of artistic presentation. Down with white walls, down with white cubes. Foregoing the decolonizing rhetoric and opting for indigenizing these art practices, brown artists could present in a visual vernacular that resonated with their immigrant native origins. In homage to his father, who built his first family house in Durango, Mexico, out of adobe with his bare hands, these bricks for Rafa call on that ancestral knowledge as a way to center immigrant labor practices in the US, bringing into sightlines those who have been marginalized by the avant-garde and the art market, an homage to those protected by the mud of Madre Tierra. It was finally my turn to help him make bricks, a practice that had always scared me off with its demand of intense physical exertion. But I was there, ready to sweat and ache, to find a way to stave off the spasms of want that haunted all of my days that year. I dug and dug and dug. I dug my hand in the wet soil. It wasn't the first time. Each time always came with a jolt. A feel-good, oxytocin-like high that surprised me again and again. It was here this whole time, beneath my feet. It was one thing to walk barefoot on a concreteless earth, to feel blades of grass between my toes, but plunging my fingers, hands, and wrists into the terrestrial mix felt ecstatic. Thank you.